do at that point.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Law News Network. I'm your host this morning, Rachel Stockman, and you were just listening to a witness in the Morris Brothers trial that is going on in Phoenix, Arizona. That was a replay, actually, of some testimony from one of the witnesses who pointed the finger at the Morris Brothers for doing this. Again, this is an assault trial that we've been streaming here on the Law News Network. I'm joined by Julie Rendelman, a criminal defense attorney and LawNewz legal analyst. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
As usual. So we were talking a little bit while this testimony was going on. This kind of case is not one traditionally that you would see a trial on. Usually it's something that the prosecution and the defense work out before it even gets to this point.
Absolutely. I mean, we were both, look, if not for the celebrity of the two individuals, we would not be hearing a single thing about this case. And I have to be honest, one wonders if this case would have been resolved with some type of misdemeanor disposition or something even better than that. Not to say that there's not a victim in this case. Obviously, it was a gang assault where someone's nose was broken and there were other injuries, but it does seem to have taken on a life of its own, probably more based on the celebrity than anything else.
And there's some major issues with this case. One of them that we were just talking about here, and I'm surprised it hasn't been raised more by the defense, is the fact that you have two twin brothers,
right? And
no one really can, none of the witnesses can really tell the difference between the two of them.
Which is huge.
Right, because how are they is the jurors going to say, yes, this guy did it, if witnesses themselves are not even sure which one's which?
Exactly, and then you have a defense attorney, one defense attorney can blame the other brother, the other one can blame the other brother, so the jury's left not knowing which one did which. And quite honestly, each of the witnesses hasn't really been able to delineate which brother did what. Even the main witness at some point eventually admitted that one of them didn't do anything, although one wonders which one didn't do anything.
So how can you charge both, and how can you convict both if even the main witnesses don't know who's who? It raises some major issues.
I think there are some major problems with the case. I mean, obviously, I think the prosecutor's position is going to be that both acted together and acted in concert, but I think you're noticing, at least from the witnesses, that it doesn't seem that both brothers were acting, and if both brothers weren't, the jury has to decide which one was and which one wasn't, and that's a cause for reasonable doubt.
And one of the reasons that this case has been going on for so long is we have three defendants, each who have their own defense attorney, each who get the opportunity to cross-examine each of the witnesses, give their openings, and then eventually give their closings. The state rested in this case yesterday, and a motion to dismiss was filed and rejected by the attorney, which is pretty typical after the state rests in a situation like this. But I think they have a decent case. There was also a surprise that kind of happened, at least for us, midway through the trial.
Right. I mean, one of the things we were talking about is it seemed on, I believe what you're talking about is on cross-examination, one of the defense attorneys questioned one of the witnesses as to whether or not he had been approached and offered money in order to embellish his story, and he admitted that, in fact, he had been approached to embellish his story. He obviously said that he didn't embellish his story, but that raises such an issue with the jury as to A, why someone would approach them, and B, whether everything regarding what everyone has testified to regarding what went down might be in some way not the truth.
Well, and of course the whole defense's claim in this is, of course, that the victim, Eric Hood, alleged victim, is after money.
Sure.
So what the witness said on the stand there really played into the defense's hand beautifully.
Absolutely. You couldn't have asked for anything better. Now, quite honestly, the witness didn't have to admit that he had been offered that. He did admit it, and he said he didn't embellish. But then you start to wonder, well, is this witness embellishing? Was this witness offered money? Was she offered money? It just starts to question everyone.
Absolutely. So I want us to, Julie's going to stick around for a few more hours this morning, and let's play a little bit of that testimony from that witness so we can get a better sense of exactly what he said.
So as we were approaching the end of the street, we saw one man hitting the guy on the ground. One of the brothers was 10 to 15 feet away from the man getting beat up. The other brother was as close as me and this lady in front of me are at.
All right, you see how the individual that's getting beat up is getting beat up.
He's getting punched. Might have seen a kick.
All right. How does the victim appear to you when you're there?
He looks like he needed some help. I mean, he wasn't defending himself, so.
And when you say he wasn't defending himself, what do you mean?
He was just laying on the ground at that point.
Did you see that individual fall to the ground?
No.
So when you got down there, was he already on the ground?
Yes.
And when you got there, did it appear the whole time that you observed him, he was not defending himself?
Yes. It was only 5 seconds, so.
And when you say not defending himself, does that include whether he was fighting back?
Exactly.
And at that point, you say one of the Morris brothers is in the area.
Correct.
How close was that Morris brother to the fight?
If I had to put a measurement on it, I'd say about 10 to 15 feet.
Okay. And are you able to tell the Morris brothers apart?
No.
But at some point while you were down there, did something give you the indication as to which Morris brother was which?
I believe so.
What do you believe indicated to you which Morris brother was which?
I think on our way back from the incident that occurred, I might have heard the one brother call the other brother's name. I don't know if he said it in a way of asking a question. I don't remember exactly how he mentioned his name, but I remember there was some kind of exchange between the two where he said his name.
Okay, and so which brother says the name? As far as which, there's one that's trailing behind you, and there's one that's with you, is that correct?
Yes.
Which brother says the name?
Marcus. Says Markeef's name.
Marcus says Markeef's name?
Correct.
All right, so when you're in that area, who's next to you?
Markeef.
You believe Markeef is next to you?
Yes.
And whose name, does he say the name?
No, Marcus says Markeef's name.
Okay. One moment, Your Honor. When you get down there, do you see anyone?
Yes.
All right, who do you see?
The lady who initially told us that there was a fight going on.
All right. You see any vehicles down in that area?
There was a vehicle, which I think was her vehicle, parked on the street, and she was helping him up off the ground, and helping him, and she was bringing him to her car.
Okay. Do you remember if anyone else was with them, those two individuals?
No, I don't remember.
Okay. And is it you, Jacob Miller, and Joe Murray down in that area?
Correct.
At any point, did you call the police?
No.
Do you know if the police were called?
I don't, at the time, no, but I believe that.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
And when you see the individual that was getting beat up and the female, what do they do while you're down there?
The individual beat, what does he do?
Yes.
I don't even know if he was even speaking or anything. I think he was just, he had just gotten beaten up, so she helped him get to the car.
How does he appear to you?
Beat up.
And when you say beat up, what does that mean?
I couldn't see his face close up. I mean, by the time we had gotten out there, she was already helping him up into his car, so I didn't really get to see what he looked like.
All right, did you help him into the car?
No.
Do you know if Jacob Miller helped him in?
I don't think Jacob did.
Okay. And do you know if Joe Murray helped him into the car?
I don't remember.
Okay. At that point, what happens?
At that point, they get into their car. I believe she had taken him to the hospital, and me, Joe, and Jacob walked back to the parking lot, and I got my kids back on the van, and we left the arch.
All right, and you've been interviewed a couple times after this by the police department, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And you were also contacted by an individual named Alonzo Hickerson, is that correct?
Correct.
When were you contacted by Alonzo Hickerson?
I don't know the exact day, shortly after the incident occurred.
Okay, and what was the nature of that? Was it by phone?
Yes.
What was the nature of that conversation?
The initial conversation, the initial reason he was calling me had to do with basketball. I don't remember what exactly about basketball. We're both coaches, we coach at a prep school, so we talk about basketball topics all the time.
Was there any discussion about this incident?
Yes.
What was that discussion about?
It initially started with him asking me if I had heard what happened.
Okay.
I responded telling him I had heard what happened. At some point in the conversation, he had said something along the lines of, I don't know the exact words or verbiage that was used, but he had made a comment about what I saw, and he asked me if I had seen the Morris brothers beat up the gentleman that got beat up.
Okay.
I initially,
Go ahead.
Initially responded saying no. And then he continued and said something along the lines of, well, if you give a statement saying that you seen or saw the Morris brothers get beat up, the gentleman get beat up by the Morris brothers, the gentleman getting beat up is going to receive a settlement, and you will receive some kind of compensation / money, something like that.
Okay, so what did that mean to you? What did you believe that he was trying to encourage you to do?
Give a false statement.
All right, and had you already talked to police at by the time he made that call?
I don't recall. I believe it was before I talked to detectives, but I don't remember if it was before or after.
Okay, and in response to that, did you indicate to him anything about that?
Never. I initially shot down the idea. I told the gentleman, Alonzo, I have no interest in giving a false statement. I tried to laugh it off, honestly, because I was shocked that somebody would ask me to do something like that. So I tried to kind of play it off. You know, when you're in a conversation and someone brings up some kind of crazy idea, I try to quickly change the subject and veer away from the situation and told him I wasn't interested.
Okay. So did that influence any of your statements to police?
Nope.
Did that influence any of your statements here in court today?
And welcome back to the Law News Network. I'm your host this morning, Rachel Stockman, and we were just listening to some very critical testimony in the Morris Brothers trial. It's an assault trial that we have been streaming live here on the Law News Network out of Phoenix, Arizona. Two NBA players that are, quite well known in the industry are facing assault charges. Why it's a big deal for them, of course, is if they're convicted of this, they face up to a 10-game suspension or even more. We're going to have some experts on the Law News Network to discuss more about the ramifications for the NBA and their contracts. In the meantime, I have criminal defense attorney Julie Rendelman here. She's a Law News trial analyst, legal analyst. We call her anything. We think she's awesome. So this is kind of some bombshell. I wanted to listen to this again because this is kind of some bombshell testimony. The whole thing's really weird. So this witness basically says that someone called him that he frequently talks to. I don't know how he knows the Morris brothers, but and asked him basically to lie.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd get money.
Sure. It is, look, to me, it is such a detrimental piece of evidence to the prosecution. What we were talking about while we were listening again was it's a bit fishy. It almost seems like the witness knows he's going to be asked those questions by the defense, as though he's almost prepared, which makes you kind of wonder if, in a sense, and again, I'm just guessing, and we're just watching, and so this is just me kind of pondering, is it possible that he is somehow in the Morris camp? Then when you by the way, just when you look at his testimony.
But he's a prosecution witness, Julie, that was called by the prosecution, right?
By the way, but the prosecution calls witnesses all the time that they don't realize are not in their camp.
Right, that's true. Yes.
You know, and this is one of them. Quite honestly, one of the things we were talking about is, even without this horrible testimony, why did the prosecution call him in the first place? Here, he doesn't really see anything. In fact, he quite honestly confuses the jury more, because he can't delineate between the two. He says that one calls to the other, but one's name is Marcus and one's name is Markeith, so it's kind of hard to delineate who you're calling Marcus. You know what I mean?
And he says at one point that one of the brothers was 10 to 15 feet away from where the altercation was happening.
And he doesn't know which one it is.
Right.
So it's just, on top of this, of what we both agree is a bombshell, destructive piece of testimony for the prosecution, I think in the end, I don't know why they ended up calling him.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't help the prosecution. His testimony didn't help the prosecution at all. And then during cross-examination, the defense gets out of him that he was basically asked to lie. Now, he claims, of course, that he didn't lie, which would align with his testimony, because he really didn't put the brothers there, so he's probably telling the truth.
Exactly. If he was going to lie, he would have done something. He would have embellished much more and put both brothers into the mix, and he doesn't.
But that certainly taints the juror's view, because if the defense's whole theory is that this whole thing was set up to get money from these rich NBA players, then there you go. That's key witness testimony.
Exactly, and then you really do start to question every single witness that's testifying on behalf of the prosecution.
And it's an interesting case. Again, we talked about this earlier, but why did prosecutors go forward with it? I still don't understand.
Well, I think that there's a case there.
Sure, someone got beat up, someone was injured.
Right, and I guess, while we both agree that it seems to have taken on a life of its own because of the celebrity status, there was a case, and I do believe if you have a witness that says that two individuals participated, then you do have the probable cause to go forward. I mean, I do think, though, at the end of the day, while I think they should have gone forward, I do wonder again why we're dealing with such a serious felony versus perhaps a misdemeanor or something a little more realistic for this type of case.
Absolutely. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens and how long the defense is going to put up their case. I mean, at this point, I'm not even sure that they need to put forward any more witnesses or who else they would bring forward in this case.
I think that this witness destroyed the prosecution. And I think the defense did a very good job, because what they didn't do is question other witnesses about whether they were approached. And I think that was a great strategy, because then you just leave the jury kind of wondering the whole time, well, was every single person approached the same way? And I think that was perfect.
And you also wonder, too, Julie, I wonder if the prosecution had no idea this guy was going to say. They had no idea. I think it was a total surprise move.
Idea.
The attorneys, I can only imagine after this day, were high-fiving behind the scenes saying, we got him, we got him.
Oh, this was, look, again, I even before he testified, I think we both agree there was major problems with at least these two defendants, the brothers, but this is just out of the park for the defense attorneys.
Absolutely. Well, let's continue listening to some more testimony from the Morris brothers trial. Interesting little note to make. Marcus Morris, who's on the Boston Celtics, is going to miss the start of training camp because of this trial. So clearly this is something that's affecting their careers. And the real question, why it matters from a national perspective, is whether or not they're going to face any repercussions from the NBA because of that. We'll get into more of that later, but for now, let's continue our review of testimony from Jose Rivera, who was an eyewitness at the scene.
We're by the little food court they have outside, or the little snack bar area. Then we were there for most of the time, and then we just seen one guy running. As I was spawning with my cousin, I seen one guy, and then me and him looked at each other. We're like, Like, I wonder why he's running. So we were there, and then we just kept going. We didn't pay too much attention to it, and then that's when we seen everybody after him.
All right, and when you say you saw everyone after him, are you referring to men or women?
Men, mainly men.
All right, and how many men did you see?
About 6, 7, maybe 8.
All right, and do you remember what they looked like?
No,
Where the area that they were running, was it well lit?
no,
Was it difficult for you to see?
yes,
All right, but you saw someone running in front of a group of other individuals that were chasing them.
yes.
Do you know where they went?
They headed towards the gate, and then the first individual that was running, he tried to make a left on Coulter, tried to go east, but he slipped and fell right there, right outside the gates.
All right, and then what happened?
And then everybody else caught up to him as he was trying to get up, and then they started beating him.
Did any of those individuals, was there a group that arrived before, or did they all arrive at the same time to the guy that was laying on the ground?
It was mainly like just one after another, just like a mob of people, and they all moved at him.
And did you see what ethnicity they were?
No,
You couldn't tell?
no.
Do you remember how tall they were?
My estimate guess, well, they couldn't see like too much difference between all of them, but one of the guys that like you could tell where the height changes between guys, but it's hard to tell because everybody's going up and down and everybody's moving, and so I'd say anywhere between 6'4", 6'5", maybe 6'6", I'd say.
And then that was at the tallest?
Yes, I believe so.
And what was the shortest that you saw? Do you remember?
Well, I'm 6 feet. Probably the shortest one was just like 5'9", 5'10".
Okay, so a little bit shorter than you?
Yes.
And do you remember how many individuals were that height, or was it too hard to tell?
It was too hard to tell. There's just a lot of commotion going on.
All right, at any point, did you want to get involved with that fight?
I did. You know, I like helping people, but it was better. In my mind, I thought about it as like, I can help, but it's better to be one than all of us, and all of us will be able to help after, maybe even with recovery or maybe getting them somewhere else, instead of being most of us being hurt.
Okay, so are you saying that you wanted more people to help you go down there?
No.
Okay, maybe I'm confused. Could you state that again then?
I would rather be on the safe side, make sure he's safe, and maybe we could get him and help him get somewhere safe, instead of all of us and everybody getting hurt.
Okay. So what did you and your cousin do?
We just mind our business. I mean, it was hard for me, but we mind our business. We didn't know what had happened. Maybe he did do something bad. I don't know. Maybe they did something bad. I don't know. But we just mind our business, stayed there, and then after like 5-10 minutes, we packed our stuff and we went home.
Do you remember how long you saw the individuals attacking the person on the ground?
Maybe 15 to 20 seconds, if that, yeah.
All right, and at any point, did you see anyone else come down to break up the fight?
I seen coaches, or I was, in my head, I assumed they were coaches. They had like the necklace or the timing belt or the little timing watch, and I seen them coming from the arch. So I was guessing there were coaches because there was younger kids there as well.
All right, and how many coaches did you see?
Maybe 2, 3, maybe.
And Did you see them get into, what did they do?
They try to break it up and try to get everybody, and the commotion to stop and get everybody back inside the arch to settle everything.
So did they actually go up and get into the fight and try to pull people off? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, by the time they got to the commotion area, everybody was already kind of backing off already,
Okay.
and they were just telling them to stop.
Okay.
Good afternoon. You'll remember we spoke on the phone.
Okay.
Good afternoon. You'll remember we spoke on the phone. Now it's maybe probably 2 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you in person.
Nice meeting you too.
And when we talked, you told me that you had remembered one male running first, and I think that's what you described here,
Yes.
correct? And that you couldn't remember anything about that person. You didn't remember his race
No.
or height, clothing,
No.
or his build, right?
No.
And you said you remember that person being followed by between 6 and 8 people?
Yes.
But as you told me, and I think you said on direct, you weren't really paying attention, correct?
I wasn't paying attention.
So is your recollection based on or having seen 6 to 8 people, or was it the sound of footsteps that sounded like 6 to 8 people? How did you conclude 6 to 8 people?
I conclude 6 to 8 people by one person running, and then as we were striking, the street was like this. So it was more like behind my cousin, so I could look at the street, just like if I was to see you. So I was here, and then I seen one guy running, we're like, he running. And then we just mind our business, kept going, and then that's when we just see, and it was just like a ball.
And you were continuing to strike during this?
Yes.
What is striking?
It's like more or less like boxing and
Don't worry about it. It actually, I honestly.
boxing, Muay Thai. It's just practicing MMA. So it's more of a fighting
Julie's
art.
hearing herself in her mic.
And obviously
I'm
that
hearing
takes,
myself too, now that you
some concentration when you're doing it, right?
Yes.
You want to make sure you're hitting the
Oh,
target.
so when you take it down,
Correct?
you won't.
Yes.
And not your cousin in the
Yes.
face. Yeah. You said that when we spoke a couple weeks ago, you remembered the shortest guy of the
No.
6 to 8
Okay,
people
you're
being
right, so
around
it must-
5'8".
okay.
Does that sound
You can
right?
put it back then, thank you.
Sorry, thanks.
And you told me that you thought the tallest guy was 6'2" or 6'3".
Okay.
Do you recall telling me that?
Yeah.
And so when you testified on direct earlier, you said, I think you pushed up the top end of that height range to about 6'6".
Yeah.
What caused the difference between,
It was just tallness. I could go to 6'4", 6'5", and it's just like maybe just that much a little taller than I am.
and I asked you for sure, or if you had any idea whether you saw somebody who was 6'9" or 6'10", and you told me that you did not, right?
No, I didn't.
You said you for sure would have noticed that, correct?
That's the major difference, being 6 foot myself. You'll see that difference.
You told me that would have stood out, correct? And you couldn't, and I think you described this incorrect, you don't remember anything else about that 6 to 8 people other than heights, correct?
Yeah, nothing else besides that.
And I think you told Mr. Bailey when he was asking you about the genders of those people, you thought it was mainly men, correct?
Yes.
But there could have been some women among those 6 to 8 people?
Not in the mob that ran after the guy. No, I didn't see no women there. The time that I seen the women was when the coaches were coming out and the younger kids were out and everybody, the commotion is trying to get back inside.
Okay. The location where you saw the individual who's being chased and he fell, that was not lit very well, correct?
No, it wasn't.
Very dark.
Yeah.
And you believe that from the time he fell and individuals started beating him until when that stopped, that was about 15 seconds?
15 to 20 seconds, yes.
And at some point, I think you told Mr. Bailey this, that 2 or 3 individuals came down the driveway after that initial group of individuals who was chasing that person, right?
Yes.
And you think these people may have been coaches?
Yes.
And you told me that they got to about 10 feet from where the altercation was taking place?
Yes.
And you don't remember anyone trying to stop those individuals from getting that close to the altercation?
No, when the coaches went up there, the commotion was pretty much almost over. They were just trying to tell everybody go back inside, so everybody
Right.
coming back off.
But no one who was there before those individuals who you think may have been coaches was trying to stop those coaches from getting close to the altercation, right?
No, nobody was trying to stop them.
And the fight had actually stopped before those individuals who you think are coaches had gotten within 30 to 40 feet of the altercation, right?
Excuse me, yes.
And you don't remember ever seeing that night, whether it's the coaches, the first person running, women who came later, the group of people, anybody who was 6'9" or 6'10", right?
No, so you'll be able to tell differently from that.
No further questions.
Mr. Ballinger, any questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Lackey?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Rivera. Mr. Rivera, you never identified anyone that was involved in that incident at Arch back on January 24, 2015,
No, I
correct?
did not.
You did not? All right. You never identified anybody by the name of Gerald Bowman as being there that night?
No.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Bailey, any redirect?
One more, Your Honor.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Law News Network. I'm your host this morning, Rachel Stockman, and you were just listening to some testimony from the Morris Brothers trial, a trial that we're streaming here on the Law News Network out of Phoenix. It's a trial we began streaming last week involving these 2 NBA players who were allegedly, and I say allegedly, involved in assault of a man named Eric Hood, who apparently had some kind of relationship with the 2 brothers, but didn't know them that well. Do you know anything about the relationship the victim had with the 2 brothers?
I didn't fully it sounds like they've known each other for a long time, and the relationship fell apart over, I think it was...
a text message to their mother.
A text message that indicated somehow some disrespect for the basketball player's mother, and so their relationship fell apart. Although there was always questions as to why it was that Hood kind of glammed onto them. Was he always interested in trying to get ahead monetarily? But that seems to be the crux of why they don't have a relationship anymore.
And that's kind of what he indicated when he first testified, that he was kind of, I forget the exact term he used, but like a middleman trying to help players with their careers and hopefully get some kind of pay because of helping them along. So it kind of makes sense that this picture of a person would want to potentially, as the defense has accused him of doing, try to extort NBA players. Now again, I don't know what really happened, but given the nature of who this guy is, given what we've heard in testimony, I could see how jurors could possibly believe he's the type of person that would want to take advantage of a situation.
Sure, but he was injured, you know?
He was.
And there's no getting around that, and the question becomes really who the people are, you know, and look, I mean, he has a scenario of which he was injured, and so the question becomes, is he taking advantage of that injury by kind of spreading, you know, who the people are that are responsible? I mean, the argument that the defense is going to have is that he tried to kind of use them in the past, he was unsuccessful, and he's maybe perhaps resentful that he was unsuccessful in getting money from them then, and so now this is his way of getting money from them now.
But at the same time, Julie, I mean, if you were beat up by some famous people, basketball players, football players, an actress, I don't know what, you got into a
An
bar
actress.
fight, I don't know.
Hopefully that won't happen.
Hopefully
but-
that will never happen, but like, I would probably sue.
Abs-
Why not?
a-
So you can't really totally hold that against it,
But
right?
that, you know, and it's funny you're saying that because I think I think we have a natural kind of, I hate to use the word cringe, but the minute we hear that someone's going after someone in a criminal case civilly as well, we immediately think that they have a bias, and they do have a bias. But you're right; they have every right to sue, and in a sense, they should sue. The problem here is, on top of everything, you have this witness, meaning the complainant himself, along with everyone else, not agreeing who is actually responsible in terms of those two brothers. And that's on top of everything the problem. And then when you add kind of the defense, shocker, which is this witness now who's saying that he was offered money to lie, you really this case starts to fall apart pretty quickly.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens today when we start streaming this trial at about 1:30 Eastern time, because the state has rested their case last night. They moved to a motion to dismiss the case. That was denied, rejected by the judge, who, by the way, Judge Pamela Gates, who's the judge in this case, she's very good judge. I mean, she is quick on the draw and she makes really good decisions.
It's funny when we sit here watching all these different trials. We've watched quite a few with very different judges.
Right.
It's so refreshing to see a judge handling a courtroom the way she is.
And listen, she has some tough, these lawyers that these NBA players have hired, they're top of the line. I can
Right.
only imagine. So in every opportunity possible, they're objecting. They're doing some very clever lawyering. So I can only imagine it makes it even more difficult for a judge when you have, really tough criminal defense
Absolutely.
attorneys.
Although I will say that they're incredibly respectful as well. And one wonders if the reason they're so respectful is because she demands respect. When you have a judge that lets you do what you want, then you do what you want. And it seems to me that she runs a tight ship, and everyone seems to respect her decisions, which it's nice to watch. And it's finally, you're able just to watch the case instead of paying attention to
The lawyering
kind of extrinsic things that aren't relevant.
Well, compare this to the judge in the Holly Bobo murder case, and there's really no difference. And I just was looking up Judge Pamela Gates, who's the judge in this case, some of her bio. She was actually in private practice for many, many years before she got in the bill in 2009. She has a Juris Doctor from JD from the University of Iowa. But like you said, it's a pleasure to watch someone like
Sure.
that on the bench. And it's interesting because that's part of what we do here. We love the cases and kind of getting into the weeds and the facts of the cases, but we also like to kind of look at the lawyering and how the judges are doing.
Absolutely, and you want the jury to make their decision based on the evidence, not based on whether the judge likes one side. Watching kind of, and I guess because Holly Bobo was such a painful experience, at least for me, you're finally watching, a judge who really doesn't seem to in any way indicate to the jury, nor should she, any particular opinion about one side or the other.
And just a kind of interesting side note, we were actually, both the defense attorney and the prosecution was trying to bar our cameras from streaming this trial. And so we had to send an attorney ourselves
Oh, really?
to the courtroom to fight on our behalf. And she made a decision split. It was, the arguments were over before they began, in that she said, well, of course,
Sure.
cameras can be there. So of course, so that also makes me like her even more, that
Right.
she allowed
Yeah.
cameras in the courtroom too.
See, we like her for many reasons.
So hopefully she'll let us stream another one of her cases. Let's continue our review of some of the testimony in this case as we wait for the live trial to begin. In a little bit, I will also bring in some experts to talk about policing and two interesting issues that are going on right now in the United States. One being a bevy of lawsuits against by female police officers against police departments who are alleging that they're not getting the proper accommodations when they're pregnant. So the ACLU has taken this issue up and they've won several times in court. I actually talked to a female police officer who is suing her. There she is right there with her baby. She's suing her own police department where she currently works because she says she was totally mistreated by the police department when she got pregnant. You're going to want to hear her story. We'll have her story at about 10:30. And also a big issue going on across the country, and that is the kneeling during the national anthem, and some Chicago police officers actually got reprimanded when this photo that you're seeing right here went viral that showed them in uniform kneeling. They got reprimanded by the Chicago police. I'll have a law enforcement officer or former law enforcement officer here as a guest to discuss whether they should have been reprimanded or not. So we'll have that coming up. In the meantime, let's continue our review of testimony from the Morris trial.
A game, like say a football game, he's the quarterback who pretty much decides how we're going to go ahead and proceed with the investigation, who's going to interview the witnesses or the suspects or the investigative leads, who's going to process the crime scene, what we're looking for, and things of that nature. So pretty much calling the plays as the investigation continues.
You are the, and this is a question, so let me phrase that. Are you the lead detective associated with this investigation?
Yes, I am.
And that was a role delegated to you basically that first day?
Yes.
By a sergeant in your squad?
That's correct.
Okay. So you arrived at Phoenix Baptist. We talked a little bit about generally what time that would have been, because you indicated you got the call about 10. At some point, do you meet with an individual who's subsequently identified you as Eric Hood?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. Where did you first see Mr. Hood?
I saw Mr. Hood in the emergency room in one of the rooms in that area, and he was, I believe he was laying down, and he was also in a seated position on a gurney or a bed.
And at this point, and I don't want to get into a ton of the specifics about the briefing, but are you aware when you meet Mr. Hood that this is related to a possible assault incident?
Yes.
And when you're meeting him, you have some information. Obviously, you're aware that he's either in the hospital or he's at that place where you've responded, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And are you aware that he had been interviewed already by a patrol officer prior to your arrival?
Yes, I was aware of that.
And some of that information was some of the info exchanged in the briefing that you attended prior to talking to Eric Hood?
That's correct.
So you walk in, you see him in, you said on a gurney or on a bed somewhere in the hospital. How does he appear when you see him?
Well, I had never seen him before, and the only information that I had was that he had some injuries to his face, and he had some lacerations. So once I saw him there and was able to start conversing with him, I could see that that those injuries were validated from the informational briefing that I had been given.
And at some point, you made the decision to have the injuries that you saw on Mr. Hood, or at least his physical condition as well, photographed by someone, correct?
Yes.
And you made that request for that, is that right?
Yes, I did.
Now, you don't actually take the photographs.
No, I don't.
Okay, but you had someone from Phoenix Police Department do that?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to show you a couple of photographs from that day, but let me ask you this question. We've talked about you getting there, and there's a briefing, and then you're talking to Mr. Hood. How many personnel from Phoenix Police were at Phoenix Baptist that night?
There was a patrol officer, patrol sergeant. There was also a crime scene specialist, and there was a detective sergeant. and then myself as a detective. And I don't recall seeing any other officers. I believe that we were the only ones from the Phoenix Police Department at that time.
And when you first see Mr. Hood and he's in the room on the gurney, was there a female in the room with him?
Yes, there was.
Okay, is that the individual that you subsequently get to know as Sharika Sharad?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you ended up doing initial recorded interviews with both the victim, Mr. Hood, and Sharika Sharad that night, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay, who did you interview first?
I interviewed Sharika Sharad.
And that would have been that night, the 24th?
Yes.
And tell me, let me ask you this question. Did you interview, that recorded interview of Ms. Sharad, was that done in the presence of Mr. Hood?
No.
Okay. Why is it, from your perspective as the detective, that you did not want them to be interviewed sitting next to each other?
Well, I never conduct any interviews with witnesses or victims together, and basically that's for the main purpose of trying to obtain their particular statement as to what they observed or what occurred with them. So it's basically to protect the integrity of the investigation.
Now, when you said you interviewed Ms. Sharad first, did you have her leave the room where Mr. Hood was, or did you move Mr. Hood?
When I interviewed Ms. Sharad, I had her leave the room and we went to a different one where it was, I believe it was a waiting room or a snack bar area, and there was no one else there.
And during your interview with Ms. Sharad, was she forthright with information? You would ask her questions, would she respond?
Yes, she was.
And that was an interview recorded, correct?
Yes, it was.
The primary statement that you had been briefed on earlier in the day, taken by patrol, do you know, as the case detective, whether those statements were recorded or not?
Previous to my interview with her?
Correct.
I didn't have any information on that, so I don't know.
Okay. No issue. I'm going to approach the witness with some exhibits.
Okay.
Approaching with exhibits 90, 97, 144, 127, 122, 96, 140, 142, and 147. Detective, I want you to flip those over and take a look at them, and then I'm going to ask you a couple questions about. If he was no longer friends with them.
Yes, he did.
Did he ever indicate to you, or during the course of your investigation, did he ever indicate to you that he had been talking at all to the two Morris brothers in the days or weeks leading up to this assault? Did he ever say he was talking to them specifically?
No.
Did he indicate to you that he had been talking to an individual by the name of Thomas E. Morris?
Yes, he did.
Now, as part of this investigation, you had the victim reporting he knew some of these people. Was that a relevant piece of information to you in trying to figure out who potentially was involved with this, or who might know information, or anything like that?
Yes.
And I think you answered this, but you indicated you were trying to substantiate whether or not what the victim was claiming to be the case that he knew these people, whether there was evidence to substantiate that in the form of, say, pictures or things like that.
Yes.
Did you contact an individual by the name of Thomasine Morris
Yes,
during this
I,
investigation?
yes, I did.
Okay. And does it sound correct to you, and I can give you your report if you would like to refresh it, that you contacted her on February 10th of 2015? Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay. And without going into the details of that conversation, was this over the phone or in person?
This was over the phone.
And you identified who you were?
Yes, I did.
Was Miss Thomasine, did the person you were on the phone with, did they identify themselves?
Yes.
As what?
As seen?
Was she confrontational with you on the phone?
Yes.
Okay. You noted that in your police report, did you not?
Yes.
On or around that day, did you also contact or attempt to contact the two Morris brothers?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about that. As part of this investigation is unfolding, did you look into what information you could find about the addresses of some of the potential participants?
Yes,
The Morris brothers specifically.
Yes, I did.
What about an individual by the name of Julius King?
Yes, I did too, on with him.
Okay. Around the time of the incident, did you figure out where it was that those individuals lived?
Yes.
And we're not going to get into the specific addresses of anything, but did you find information that those three individuals, Marcus, Marquis, and Julius, were all living at the same location?
Yes, I did.
And what is some of the material, I guess, did you look up information like billing material and things tied to that address?
I contacted our City of Phoenix Water Billing Department and was able to obtain an address through that method. And then also I had another detective, or actually two other detectives, who I refer to as detectives that concentrate specifically on social media type of research. And they were able to go ahead and obtain an address which was consistent with the water billing address that we had obtained.
Okay, so that address that you located those three people living at, was that in the city of Phoenix?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Let the lights back on.
Yes, sorry, Judge. In terms of the investigation, you authored a number of pages of reports as it relates to this departmental report, the police report.
Yes, I did.
And there could be times I'm going to ask you to look back at that, but for the jury, as you're the first police officer that we're hearing from, why are police officers like yourself, why do you even write reports?
Well, the report is a documentation of our investigation from basically the very beginning to the very end. It has all of the information as far as who's involved, where it occurred, what occurred, and any other information that might be relevant to the crime which we think was committed.
Now, would you disagree with me that the address that you listed, I know I didn't want you to get into specifics, was a Paradise Valley address and not a Phoenix address?
I believe it could have been a Paradise Valley address, because I think it may have been right in that area where it could have been Scottsdale, North Phoenix, or Paradise Valley.
Did you get the opportunity, so you have that address, did you go to that location?
Yes, I did.
Now, the February 10th date that we're talking about where you tried to attempt to contact individuals at that location, you physically went there. The location that you had listed as an address for Marquis, Marcus, and Julius.
Yes, I did.
And did you knock on the door?
Yes,
Okay. Did someone answer the door?
yes.
All right. Who answered the door?
That was a gentleman that introduced himself as Markeith Morris.
And did you tell him why you were there?
Yes, I did.
And you don't wear a uniform typically, do you?
No, I don't.
All right. But you typically carry your badge and things like that on your hip.
Yes, I carry a police badge, and I also have an identification badge which has got my photograph and credentials on it, and I have a radio with me and a standard issue firearm.
All right, so did you tell him you were a police officer?
Yes, I told him I was a detective with the Phoenix Police Department.
Now, did you tell him you were investigating a situation that occurred at the Arch facility?
Yes.
Now, that individual.
And welcome back to the LawNewz Network. I'm Rachel Stockman. Sorry, I'm fumbling my words a little bit this morning. It's been an early morning, but I'm Rachel Stockman, your host this morning, joined by criminal defense attorney Julie Rendelman. We've been just listening to some testimony from the Morris brothers trial that's happening out of Phoenix. We are listening to the lead detective in the case. And one of the things the defense said in this was basically the detective was kind of put more resources, and the police department put more resources to the case because of the high profile nature of the case. Does that happen often if you're dealing with celebrities?
I think it happens whether you're dealing with celebrities or any type of case that has a lot of attention, whether it be the more serious crimes or something that, for whatever reason makes the crime unique. I mean, in a sense, one would argue that you should be putting resources into every crime.
Right.
So him putting resources isn't a bad thing.
Right.
But again, when we start to talk about kind of the fact that if in our mindset, if they hadn't been celebrities, that this wouldn't be happening, it starts to kind of say, well, then why is it that this case is so important to the police department and to the district attorney's office?
And of course, Julie has been one of our trial analysts for several months now, and you'll remember the Aaron Hernandez trial. And that is also, in that case, one of the reasons the defense said that the prosecutors were so vigorous in their pursuit of justice, because they saw this big target that they could land. So I can't imagine in situations like this, when cops are dealing with celebrities, that they put more time into these cases, whether we want to admit it or not. I'm sure it happens.
I mean, look, this is a case that not only, is dealing with two, celebrities because of their position in the NBA, but keep in mind now this detective is on a trial feed that the world can see, and so in a sense, because he's being analyzed, he's going to arguably put more work to make sure he doesn't look bad even in a setting like this. So of course he's going to make sure he's dotting his I's and crossing his T's. While he should be in every single case, one would expect him to do a little extra just because he's under such scrutiny.
And a case like this, he knows from the get-go, when you're dealing with two celebrities, that he's going to be under the microscope, and that and if they do go forward with charges like they did against the Morris brothers, that they're going to be hiring the top, most aggressive criminal defense attorneys that are going to be looking at every nook and cranny of this investigation, trying to show somehow that it was a shoddy investigation or that police officers didn't do their job well enough. I can imagine, you were a DA for many years in Brooklyn. How did it change your approach to a case when you knew the defendant was going to hire someone that you considered a very, very good criminal defense attorney? Did it make you more nervous?
Of course it did.
Yes.
I mean, it's a natural thing that, look, I mean, we're all competitive in nature, especially when we choose to be lawyers. So, there's a competitive feel, and there's also stress. I mean, I did homicides for years. So, when you have a defense attorney that is formidable and is as strong, if not stronger than you, then of course you're going to be worried about, many things, including protecting kind of your case and hoping that that justice prevails, even though, because sometimes a defense attorney and a prosecutor can can kind of manipulate a jury just like anyone can. So it's always stressful. At the same time, I will say, especially as a prosecutor, I was a little more excited to handle a case where I felt the defense attorney was strong as well, because I felt even then that it was important for a defendant to have a fair trial, and you wanted a defense attorney that knew what they were doing, because you certainly didn't want to be stepping all over the other side. So I always felt better about it.
And also it helped you in terms of your ability to progress as a prosecutor and
Sure.
grow as a lawyer to go up against someone that's so tough.
Exactly. It doesn't feel good when you're, in a
Yes.
sense, it doesn't feel good to bully someone, to be the bully. It feels better when you feel like you're even with the other person, and you
That
know
it was
the
a
law,
fair
they know
fight
the
and
law,
you
it's
won.
a fair fight. Exactly.
So I want to turn now to another case that we've been following here on the Law News Network. It's not a trial, but it's still a very interesting case, and it's involving a cop, a police officer, who lives in Illinois, and she works for the Village of Frankfort Police Department. She was a police officer there for more than 10 years. In 2015, her name is Jennifer Panettone. She got pregnant. And you can see there, that's a picture of her and her husband with her, now the little boy is 15 months old. He's very cute. But she is actually suing her own police department because she says she was discriminated against when she became pregnant. She said that she was growing larger and she was not given light duty. Instead, she was made to continue her patrol duty. She wasn't given a new uniform. Her bulletproof vest didn't fit her anymore as she was growing progressively through the months. Julie, what do you make of this case? The details, if true, are very sad.
Yeah, and of course, we're reading the complaint, which is always going to be biased towards the complainant or the plaintiff in the case. But if it's true, it's just unbelievable, and maybe it's not unbelievable that in this day and age, this is how a police department handles a woman. You can see in the Illinois, certainly in this police department, it looked like they had 3 total female police officers, and she was the only one that did full-time patrol. The fact that, if this is true, that they didn't provide for her the protections that they would every other officer. I mean, this is a woman who now is not just handling for herself, but then the baby that's growing inside of her, and now she doesn't even have kind of the materials that would protect her and the child from the potential of either being shot at or any other serious things. Makes absolutely no sense to me. And it seems like she continued to be bullied even afterwards, so it's
and
mind-boggling.
Julie, believe it or not, these are some of these cases we've been following at LawNewz.com. This is not, you think, okay, maybe this is just some small backwards police department where this happened. This is happening, Julie, all across the country. And the ACLU is representing a lot of these female police officers that are faced with this. And policing is a very unique thing when you become pregnant, because it's not like what you or I do when we became pregnant, where we were just in an office, really. I mean, maybe, were you in the prosecutor's office?
I was. I think I went into labor during a
trial.
Yeah.
But at the same time, thank God we're not in dangerous situations.
Exactly.
We're not shooting at bad guys. We're not going to domestic violence calls where we could put ourselves in jeopardy. And I just can't imagine as that police officer not feeling like the department was behind you.
Especially because it seems like, at least from the complaint, that she offered so many options that would allow her to be able to work full-time, do her job, but just not be in the situation she was in when she was not pregnant. And they seem to refuse her at every single time she offered something up.
And we actually spoke with her on the Law News Network, so we're going to be playing the interview I did with her in a few minutes. I did want to also read the statement from the Village of Frankfort, and they said they can't comment on the substance of this because it's a pending lawsuit, but they can say the Village of Frankfort believes it has complied with state and federal law, as well as the terms of the collective bargaining agreement that she has with the police department. Interestingly, they say the EEOC previously dismissed Officer Panettone's charge of discrimination and retaliation, finding that it was unable to conclude the information obtained during its investigation established establish violations. So that could hurt her, the fact that she lost in front of the EEOC.
Absolutely, but again, you know, and look, this is just an allegation, so we always have to keep that in mind. And so, you know, but at the end of the day, obviously the evidence will either be there or it won't be there. But she did leave, it looks like, when she was 5 months pregnant, and one wonders why it is that she had to leave.
She took unpaid leave. She said she had no other choice. And what's kind of amazing about this case, too, is that Jennifer, the officer, went forward with this lawsuit while she is still being employed at the Village of Frankfurt.
Exactly.
I can't imagine coming into work knowing that I just sued my boss, and this isn't like a huge police department. It's not like the Chicago police where you're never going to see the people you're suing.
No,
and that happens all the
absolutely.
time, but you're in a small community.
But
and
you got to
she's
give
suing
her.
them.
You got to give
I gotta
her
give her
credit. You know,
which
it
makes
takes a
me
strong woman to do that, and it gives her some level of credibility that she's, you know, still. Obviously, she wants to be a police officer. You know, she's invested her life to be that, but she's allowed to be a police officer and a mother. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, and we will hear more from her interview coming up in the next few minutes. After we hear from her, we'll have a guest join us who's a former NYPD police officer, and he has a different take on this. And he does think, I mean, he doesn't necessarily think that how she was treated is right, but he does have some concerns with pregnant police officers on the police force defending all of us. We'll see. I mean, I can understand when you become 7 or 8 months pregnant, it becomes very hard to move around. And if I was in a dangerous situation, would I want a 8-month pregnant woman there to help me?
And
Maybe
also,
not.
there's an argument to be made that police officer who's pregnant is going to want to protect herself and her baby before she's potentially protecting someone else. But this officer, if you accept what she's saying, offered up options that would not put her in kind of, I hate to say, the line of fire, but would allow her to do her job,
like
but
take
not be out of
walk-ins.
patrol. Exactly. And certainly one would expect that those are options that seem viable for someone who's pregnant.
Well, Julie, stick around for a few more minutes. We're going to continue our review of testimony in the Morris brothers trial that's going on this afternoon, that's supposed to pick back up in a few hours. We've been streaming it live here on the Law News Network. We heard from the lead detective yesterday, was on the stand for several hours. The state finally rested their case. It took so long because in this case, in addition to the Morris brothers, there's one other defendant who each has their own criminal defense attorney. So every single witness gets cross-examined by 3 attorneys if they want to. So that's why this case is progressing a little bit slower than our usual cases, especially for an assault trial. Again, this is not like it's a murder trial. This is a pretty simple trial in terms of what exactly happened. No dispute that there was an altercation. The question in this case is whether there's enough there to place the Morris brothers at the scene and involved in the altercation. Of course, the defense in this case is saying this was all over money. Eric Hood, the victim, has filed a lawsuit and is basically trying to extort the NBA players because he knows they have deep pockets. Let's continue our review of the case. Julie Rendelman, our guest this morning, Law News legal analyst, will stand by as we continue that review.